International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Muslims around the world congratulated today at Mount Arafat south of Mecca for the most important pillar of the pilgrimage. The G7 summit has taken place in Bari, Italy, with the participation of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, during which he has met with several world leaders and heads of state and from brotherly and friendly countries. And local health authorities have confirmed that the death toll from the Israeli onslaught has risen to 37,296 reported fatalities, with an additional 85,197 individuals sustaining injuries. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Muslims from around the world has congregated today, Saturday, at Mount Arafat south of Mecca for the most important pillar of the pilgrimage. They walked from the tent city of Mina to the hillside area of Arafat, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, delivered his final sermon about 1400 years ago, calling for equality and unity among Muslims. The ritual at Mount Arafat, known as the Hill of Mercy, is considered the culmination of the Hajj. It is often the most memorable for pilgrims who stand shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, asking Allah for mercy, blessings, prosperity, and good health. The mount is about 20 kilometers southeast of Mecca. Hajj is one of the largest religious gatherings on earth. The rituals officially started yesterday, Friday, when pilgrims moved from Mecca's Grand Mosque to Mina. Saudi authorities expect the number of pilgrims this year to exceed 2 million, approaching pre-pandemic levels. The G7 summit has taken place is taking place in Bari, Italy, with the participation of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, during which he has met with several world leaders and heads of state from brotherly and friendly countries. Asya Bakar has more details in this report.
President Abdelmadjid Tebboune has held meetings and interviews with many world leaders and heads of state of brotherly and friendly countries, as well as heads of regional organizations. The President of the Republic was received on his arrival by the President of the Italian Council, Ms. Giorgia Meloni, whom he met again after flying back to Algeria. During his stay in Italy, President Tebboune received the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, at his residence. During the event, the President of the Republic greeted the leaders of the Group of Seven, as well as heads of state of several countries, in addition to the leaders of regional, continental, and international organizations. The summit addressed several topics and issues, including the situation in the Gaza Strip, immigration and development in Africa, as well as climate change and artificial intelligence. On the sidelines of the G7 summit, President Tebboune also met with his Mauritanian counterpart, Mohamed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazouani, and the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. The President also received the head of Tunisian government, Ahmed Hashani. On the occasion of the summit, the President of the Republic took a family photo with leaders and participants. Earlier, the President received French President Emmanuel Macron at his residence. And let's recall that the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, flew back to Algeria today, Saturday.
Let's recall that the G7 summit, which brought together the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Germany, Italy, and Canada to examine several files, including the situation in Gaza, the migration issue, development in Africa, climate change, and artificial intelligence. Development in Africa, economic security, artificial intelligence, and climate change are the main themes on the agenda of the G7 summit, whose proceedings taking place in Bari, Italy, with the participation of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. More details in this report by our colleague Majid Mila.
During this event, the leaders of the 7 member states, as well as heads of state and government of a number of countries and international organizations, invited by Italy, which assumes the presidency of the G7, will address, alongside the regional and international issues, several themes linked to the development of emerging and developing countries. The G7 summit is focusing in particular on development in Africa as part of specialized dialogue sessions between G7 leaders and representatives of invited African nations. During the first day of the summit, particular emphasis was placed on Africa, discussed with several government actors and international investors. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who chaired a session on Thursday dedicated to investments and infrastructure projects in Africa, stressed that Italy pays particular attention to the African continent with its difficulties and its opportunities. She also assured that the G7 member countries adhere to the Mattei Plan, initiated by Italy in favor of Africa and which advocates for equal cooperation with African nations. In this regard, Ms. Meloni said during the meeting that Africa is asking for the opportunity to compete on an equal footing, which is not possible if it does not have infrastructure. The Group of Seven, which brings together Italy, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, plans to expand dialogue with the rest of the countries to address a wide range of global issues, including climate, food, security, and development issues.
And on the occasion of the G7 summit, the Italian journalist and head of Foreign Affairs editorial board at DIR, one of the leading Italian press agencies, Mr. Vincenzo Guardina, had this to say about the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's invitation of African leaders to the G7 summit, to our colleague Rim Bukhari.
I would say that in the last 2 years or so, there has been quite a strong focus from the part of the Italian government on this so-called Mattei Plan. So Algeria is a key partner when it comes to the Italian government, as well as other African and sub-Saharan countries. And so, as you know, African leaders have been invited at the summit. Yesterday we heard from the president of the African Development Bank. The focus has been very much on investment in key infrastructures. So when it comes to the political declarations, to say the least, there has been quite a focus on African issues. Even if when it comes to African journalists, we haven't seen many of them, and that's a pity, of course.
That was the Italian journalist and head of Foreign Affairs editorial board at DIR, Mr. Vincenzo Guardina. The representative of the Observatory for the Protection of the Natural Resources of Western Sahara, Eric Hagen, denounced foreign companies which are accomplices of the Moroccan occupier, which are plundering the natural resources of occupied Western Sahara. Speaking during a conference entitled Reality of the Media Work and its Challenges Under Occupation and Refuge, held in Italy, the representative underlined that the companies which get involved in any business in Western Sahara without the consent of the latter's authorities are taking a big risk vis-à-vis the international law.
Quanto al Tribunal Europeo, sarà difficile.
With regard to the European Court, it will be difficult to imagine that it will issue a different sentence than the previous ones. It's clear that this will have an impact on trade occurring in the occupied territories between the Union and Morocco. There will be implications. What is more complicated is to know how the behavior of private companies belonging to other industries which have nothing to do with fisheries or agriculture, and which rather operate in infrastructure such as Italian companies, for instance, and how they will react to this sentence and how the Polisario will react. We don't know this.
That was the representative of the Observatory for the Protection of Natural Resources of Western Sahara, Eric Hagen. Local authorities or local health authorities confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught has risen to 37,296 reported fatalities, with an additional 85,197 individuals sustaining injuries. The majority of the victims are women and children. The Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, resulting in the documented killing of at least 30 Palestinians and the injury of 95 others. Thousands of victims remain missing, either buried under the rubble or scattered on the roads. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupation detained Meanwhile, the Israeli occupation detained at least 5 Palestinians from various parts of the occupied West Bank. The occupation forces rounded up 2 Palestinians and ransacked the houses of their families in the town of Beita, south of Nablus. Earlier today, in Ramallah district, the occupation forces stormed the Jazaloun refugee camp north of Ramallah and detained a Palestinian identified as a resident of the Gaza Strip. And the World Health Organization WHO has been alarmed by the worsening health crisis in the West Bank occupied by the Zionist entity, where more restrictions, violence and attacks on medical infrastructure are complicating access to care. Majid Mila has more details.
A statement issued by the United Nations agency indicated the emergency for immediate and active protection of civilians and for the health system in the West Bank. The World Health Organization noted that since the start of the Zionist entity's aggression in the Gaza Strip, 521 Palestinians, including 126 children, have been killed and more than 5,200, including 800 children, injured in violence in the West Bank. The Palestinian presidency estimates that at least 545 people have been killed by Zionist troops or settlers since October 7. The organization deplored the influx of injured people increases the growing burden of trauma and emergency care in health institutions already under strain and which can only operate at 70% of their capacity due to the lack of money. The West Bank, occupied by the Zionist entity since 1967, has been experiencing an outbreak of violence for more than a year, which has worsened since October 7. According to the organization, most hospitals in Gaza Strip have been destroyed or heavily damaged since the aggression began. But the WHO also documented 480 attacks on health facilities or ambulances in the West Bank between October 7 and May 28. These attacks left 16 dead and 95 injured. Still, according to the WHO, access to care is further complicated in the West Bank by the closure of crossing outlets between the Zionist entity and the West Bank. The WHO again denounces a serious taxation crisis aggravated by the fact that the Zionist entity withholds since October 7 an increasing share of the income tax it collects from Palestinians. Means that caregivers receive only half of their salary for almost a year and 45% of essential medicines are out of stock.
And one of the largest black civil rights, the NAACP, has urged the President of the United States, Joe Biden, to indefinitely halt all weapons deliveries to the Israeli occupation and pressure the U.S. ally to end its war in the Gaza Strip, sending a reminder that his support for Israel could hurt him among black voters in November's election. The NAACP's call was a rare instance for the influential civil rights organization taking a position on U.S. foreign policy towards a country without a significant black population. The NAACP said the U.S. must use its influence with the Israeli occupation to bring a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. It also called on President Biden to draw the red line and indefinitely end the shipping of all weapons and artillery to the Israeli occupation. Asked what would turning down such calls cost Biden amid the elections race, our California-based political analyst Mr. Hamoud Salhi had the following.
Biden and his administration and the entire Democratic Party have to be concerned, particularly with the legislative and presidential elections are in a short period of time. They fear that the African American will most likely stay home and not vote for the Democrat Party, which could mean or translate into their defeat in the presidential and congressional elections. This is seen particularly in the swing states, which where the African Americans played a major role in the last election, bringing President Biden to power.
Mr. Hamoud Salhi added that this showed the growing support of the African American community with the Palestinian or for the Palestinian people.
It is a statement that speaks volume to the morality that Martin Luther King stood for and fought for, and his message is for justice. It is also an indication and a statement that the African American whose support for the Palestinian has grown recently as a result of the genocide committed against the Palestinians in Gaza. This is a reminder as a minority who experienced slavery and racism and continues to experience racism. They see their solidarity with the Palestinians as a natural outcome, and they relate to the struggle of the Palestinians.
That was our California-based political analyst, Mr. Hamoud Salhi. And in Sudan, the fight plaguing in El Fasher, the only major town in Darfur to escape the control of paramilitaries fighting the army in Sudan, has left 226 dead. According to a new report issued by NGO Médecins Sans Frontières, the toll could actually be much higher. Dwellers are unable to travel for emergency care due to clashes, artillery strikes, and aerial bombardments by the army. And now back to Algeria, where the geopolitical expert, Mr. Arslan Shikhawi, said to the Mujahid daily newspaper that he considers the participation of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, in the G7 summit a confirmation of our country's leadership in the Mediterranean region. Mariam Bershi has more.
Mr. Shikhawi stressed that the participation of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, to the G7 summit, which gathered since Thursday until today in Italy, the leaders of the most advanced powers, Arab and African heads of state, and the UN Secretary-General, highlighted Algeria's key position in the Western Mediterranean basin with its strategic depth in the Sahel and the African continent. He maintained that Algeria is seen by the G7 as a reliable and solid partner, highlighting the current context of reconfigured political maps and strategic alliances. He said one of the reasons for this is Algeria's experience in combating the many malicious scourges that undermine regional and continental stability and security, such as terrorism, illegal immigration, and drug trafficking. Mr. Shikhawi also stressed that Algeria is a lever for gas and mining and has significant diversified resources, particularly rare minerals, which are necessary for energy conversion, alternative low-carbon industries, and the technologies revolution. Algeria, which also stands out for its recognized expertise in the field of mediation, has always played an active role in the peaceful resolution of conflicts to promote peace while respecting the integrity of states and their territories without ever abandoning its immutable principles of defending the just causes of oppressed peoples, foremost among which is the Palestinian question, whose situation in Gaza was on the agenda of the G7 summit. Mr. Shikhawi added that President Tebboune's presence at the summit was a further opportunity to reaffirm Algeria's constance. According to the expert, it is clear that Italy, which invited non-G7 countries to the summit, is counting heavily on the strong support of its historic partner, Algeria, to ensure the success of the Enrico Mattei plan, which is currently being implemented with a view to building new partnerships between Italy and the countries of the African continent. Investments that amount to 5.5 billion euros were announced in a series of projects that are supposed to focus on energy infrastructure because Italy still wants to be the hub for the transit of gas and soon hydrogen and electricity between the two shores of the Mediterranean. Expert Shikhawi also believes that the G7 meeting took place in an international context dominated by geopolitical tensions surrounding the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the murderous tragedy suffered by the Palestinian people in Gaza.
That's the end of the news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, starting with the Arafat and Hajj, where hundreds of thousands of Muslim pilgrims are today standing on Mount Arafat asking for Allah's forgiveness and mercy on the second day of the Muslim Hajj. With my colleague Saeed Bougazi, it will be followed by another program devoted to the International Day of Hunger. With this, we come to the end of it. We'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you.
Arafah is the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, the 12th and final month in the Islamic calendar. It occurs on the second day of Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca and its surrounding religious waymarks that Muslims are obliged to perform at least once in their lifetimes, if able. The day of Arafah is the Hajj in itself. So said the Prophet, God's peace and blessings be upon him. Al-Hajju Arafah, meaning Arafah is the Hajj. Without observing it in its proper place and time, there is no Hajj. This means that all other aspects and rites of Hajj have some lawful way to make up for missing or modifying them, or factors that may excuse one from them. On the day of Arafah, from somewhat before noon,